Blessings, blessings, everybody. Come on in, come on in. Welcome. So happy and excited about the show tonight. We have a phenomenal group of panelists who are going to speak on this topic. If you're a first timer, I want to welcome you to the Window TV show. I am your host, Love TaShia Asanti. And just to tell you a little bit about the window, we're waiting for one more guest, Miss Tammy PA, to come on. So hopefully she'll be joining us any minute. Really want to hear her voice on this topic. The window is a portal to dissect and talk about the things that we as humans witness through the windows of our lives. From the boardroom to the bedroom, what do you see? What do you love? What do you hate? What makes you feel good? And what pisses you off? We want to know. So please, please tell us, join the discussion. This is not a lecture, it's not a workshop. This is a dialogue. So we want you to be part of the discussion. So come on in. I see y'all jumping in. You can also comment if you're on Facebook Live. You can comment on the discussion. We want to hear your thoughts. We're going to be joined in just a minute, hopefully by Tammy PA if she can get through. But we're getting ready to go ahead and get started. So I first of all want to thank our sponsors, Noble Trinity Media and Your World TV. I also want to thank our West African sponsor, Adulawo TV. Also want to thank our corporate sponsors, House of Pinky and thepinkshot.com. Without your support, we couldn't do what we do. We also want to thank you, the viewers, right? We couldn't do what we do without you who come on and support us and watch the show every time we air. If you're just tuning in, again, welcome to the window. Thank you for the love. I see it. I'm your host, Love TaShia Asanti. And our topic tonight, which we're going to dive right on into, is the Dave Chappelle's controversial new Netflix TV special, The Closer. I am delighted to welcome our esteemed guests tonight. We have Michael Crawford, who is a chief strategist, op-ed writer, and director at Freedom to Marry Organizations. Crawford's op-ed on the Dave Chappelle Show was recently published on NBCnews.com. He is an incredible brother doing amazing work in the community. His writing has appeared in NBC News Think, Wired, Newsweek, The Independent, New York Daily News, and The Hill. So you're going to get to talk to him in just a minute. I also want to welcome Brother Cleo Manago. I don't even have to tell you all about this brother, but I will. If you're one of the few people in America who haven't ever heard of him,
Get
he is,
out of here.
he is a social architect, chief advisor at the Black Men's Exchange, behavioral health analyst, and regular contributor to the TV show Roland Martin Unfiltered, which is aired, of course, on TV One, BET, and Facebook TV. His work as a curator for the National Amasi Black Wellness Centers have been a model for many other flagship organizations. And we're going to post in just a minute his YouTube video on the subject. We're also going to post the link to Michael's editorial, which is amazing and powerful. And I thank you, Donna Payne, if you're watching tonight, for telling me about Michael's editorial. And I'm excited to share with you, our viewers. I also want to welcome Jayla Sylvester. She's a public speaker, educator, and activist who has shared her wisdom and revelations with the community at large for over a decade. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit more about just the technical parts of her background. Amazing, amazing person. She has been dedicated to building healthy communities for the LGBT community for the last 14 years, and her passion led her to assist many groups dealing with intersectional trauma that have encountered housing, food insecurity, mental and physical health challenges, and unique struggles related to gender and race. In her career as a public servant, she has also devoted much time to securing certifications and trainings related to mental health and positive behavioral change. So her focus has been on empowering adults, but also youth very heavily. And she says in her free time, She's a parent to her three beloveds, Isis, Bagel, Nintendo, and Coco, which are her fur children. So I'm really excited to have her as a part of this group tonight. I don't see Tammy PA. I'm assuming my sister is having some challenges in getting on, so hopefully she'll join us before the show ends tonight. Because if you've ever heard her speak, Tammy is just an amazing person. She started this group on Facebook called The People's Place, and she, if you know anything about her, she's a comedian, she's an actor, she's an amazing sister. And her frank dialogues, if you've ever been a part of them, I always say she says what everybody in the world is thinking, but they're not bold enough to say. She says it, and she's very frank and candid with what she says. So I really want her to be a part of tonight's discussion, but probably technical difficulties, I'm assuming, have interfered with her being with us. So maybe we'll have her on part two. So without that, without further delay, I want to jump into this discussion. I want to say this is an interactive discussion. Again, we welcome your thoughts and views. I also have to give a disclaimer that the statements and views of our guests do not necessarily represent the views of our sponsors or me as host, or our networks, or corporate donors. The window does offer an uncensored platform representing a rich and diverse spectrum of views. The only rule is respect and civility of our panelists and speakers, as well as you, our audience, right? We can say whatever we want to say, but we say it with respect and decency. I want to ask our panelists, because we have some really passionate and amazing people about to speak on this panel, to please limit your responses so that we can hear from everybody. And I'll help keep the conversation moving. So please honor me as the moderator for this discussion. So I want to jump right in. I want to start with you, Michael, and ask you what you think. Do you think that Dave Chappelle's statements promote or support violence and intolerance against trans or LGBT people? And if you can, of course, give your thoughts on that question, but please use specific comments or refer to specific comments or jokes that you felt promoted hate, violence, or intolerance against SGL, LGBTQI, y'all know all of them letters. So, Michael, it's on you. Welcome, by the way, to the window.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here and also happy to be in conversation with Cleo and Jayla and you as well. So it's from my perspective, it's not so much that Dave promotes actual violence, but what he does do is call into question the humanity of LGBTQ people. And when you think about comments like when he was talking about DaBaby, and he basically said that DaBaby punched the gay community in the AIDS, right? Like there's no way to take that as anything but dehumanizing. Or when, for example, he referred to himself as Team Turf,
Yes.
and spoke out, about J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling, of course, is the creator of Harry Potter, and she couldn't leave well enough alone. She couldn't just let us love Harry Potter. She had to go in and question the humanity of trans women, which I think is incredibly offensive. And of course, I'm a cisgender person, so I don't speak for the trans community, but I want to be clear that when you question the humanity of people, then you are giving a cue, especially when you have a platform like Dave Chappelle, right? I think this was his sixth special on Netflix, which means that there are literally millions of people who are seeing his work. Millions of people across the globe at this point who are seeing his work. And so when you call into question the humanity of trans people, you are giving a cue to viewers who are watching the show, who are listening to you, to your fans, to also question the humanity of trans people and LGBTQ people more broadly. And when you do that, it sets the stage for intolerance, potentially violence, etc. And I think that, in the op-ed that I wrote for NBC News, one of the things that I talked about was my personal experience, which when I was a kid, grew up in a poor Black neighborhood in Houston. And when I was a kid, the homophobia that I experienced started off as jokes. It started off with in elementary school when kids who were my age and a little bit older laughing and calling me punk and sissy. It started at jokes, elevated to violence, and I made it through. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. But I don't think it's okay to say, well, it's something that builds character, or the LGBT community needs to learn to take a joke, because we're pretty good at taking jokes and making them, right? And some of the best jokes about our communities are actually developed by us. So I think I'm not necessarily saying that Dave is inciting violence. I am saying that he is giving space and giving cues to his fans, the people who follow him, who watch and are entertained by his work, to question the humanity of LGBTQ people. And I think that is really sad, especially for someone who is as talented as Dave is.
Thank you. Awesome. Awesome. And I want to circle back. So I'm hearing you say, Michael, that, one, I love that you said in your editorial that you weren't calling for Netflix to remove it, but that you were hoping that it would spearhead and initiate dialogues like this one around the subtle forms of discrimination or oppression, or even, like you said, making inhumane or taking away from the humanity of LGBT people. And
Well,
so, yeah,
yeah.
go
So
on.
I'm not calling for Dave to be canceled, right? Like, we can
Yes,
talk about cancellation a little bit later. I think
yes,
cancel culture
yes,
is just a crock.
yes.
But what I am saying is, wouldn't it be amazingly powerful if Dave and Netflix were to give that amazing, massive platform
Mm,
to queer comedians who
mm,
can join Dave on stage, potentially in a dialogue? Now,
mm.
that would be something truly transformative. I think part of the challenge is Dave has been around for so long, and I think he's achieved the kind of status where very few people tell him no,
Yes.
right? It's kind
Yeah.
of like no one is telling Beyonce no, right? And Dave isn't quite Beyonce level, but he's at a level where he's rich, he's famous, he has multiple Netflix specials. He can probably do specials and tours, anytime he wants, even in the midst of the pandemic. And I think that he is in some ways stuck in the past. Right. I think one of the things that we've seen is that the Black community more broadly has evolved on LGBTQ issues, with the majority of Black people now supporting civil rights for LGBTQ folks, including a majority supporting the freedom to marry. And I think Dave is stuck in a certain place on LGBTQ issues, and the feeling that he can have humor that's laughing at, not with, LGBTQ people. And I think that's a shame for someone who's as talented as he is.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying your points. And that kind of segues into, and I can't wait to hear from everybody. But Cleo Manago, welcome again, who recently did a YouTube video. He also was a guest on the epic Roland Martin Unfiltered television show, previously aired on TV One and BET, now with millions of viewers on Facebook Watch. And Cleo, you have become a go-to person on Roland Martin's television show and many other platforms in which you speak on and issues related to race and culture. So I'm excited to welcome you to the window for the first time and hopefully many other times to come. And your thoughts on this same question: do you think Dave Chappelle's statements promote or support violence and intolerance against trans and/or SGLBT, LGBT people? And again, please use specific comments or jokes that go both ways or explain your point of view on the first question.
Okay, well, thank you for the invitation. I look forward to this dialogue, excuse me, and hearing from everyone. Pardon me again. My first question was, can you hear me? I'm in Cali, Colombia, and I don't know how good the signal is, but can you hear me and see me?
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely. Very good.
oh, excellent. Okay. Well, I don't see David Chappelle as a hero or go to person to develop literacy about same gender loving people. in trans people. That's not who he is. That's not what I expect from him. I expect him to do what he's doing. You may remember that, just to give some context in terms of my perspective of him, you may remember that some years ago, he was given a whole lot of money to put on a dress, and he refused. And his perspective was that there were too many black men. There was a disproportionate amount of black men getting paid money to put on a dress. That included Will Smith. It included Martin. I forgot Martin's last name, but the guy with the show called Martin. That includes a number of people, including several people whose names escape me right now.
Wesley Snipes and a bunch,
Chris Rock, and it was a lot in a row. And he had critique that this society does more stereotyping, charactering, and emasculating of black men than it does affirming black men, particularly at that time up until now. I mean, police brutality and the murder of black men and women, particularly black men, is another emasculation and a postmodern castration, public castration of black men. And those issues are what are the underpinning of David's anxiety along these lines, particularly when it comes to trans people. In his comedy routine, he kept talking about male quality and stuff, things that kind of value trans people, if you will, trans women, etc. And the anxiety that he's experiencing, and I think this is true for the person called the baby, whose name is really Jonathan Kirk, is that they, like a whole bunch of black people, male and female, are dealing with the impact of an unhad conversation regarding concern about the compromise of black men and the attack on black males from slavery until now, and the lack of the paralysis to rationally address same-gender loving people and trans people up to this date as a intentional, neutral. It's bubbling up in dysfunctional ways that can be hurtful and help. A lot of stuff that's bubbling up or repressing black males, in some occasions, result in violence. One of the things that I resonate with the last guest, but with a different angle, is that I'm hoping that David's appearance on Netflix could also start some conversations, but not simply about same-gender loving and trans people, about what's at the root of perspectives like the baby and Dave Chappelle. One of the things that the previous guest said that I have was he mentioned
you're going in and out a little bit, but we're getting the most of what you're saying, and I don't want to miss a word. So if you could just, yes, we're getting the most of it. We're getting like 90% of it. Yes, better. Okay. Come right up on there. Yes, Cleo, go on, because we want to get every word.
The previous guest mentioned that from his perspective, black people were becoming more tolerant, and in terms of voting, were more supportive of issues relevant to same-gender loving and trans people. But I believe that the anxiety on these issues, alive and well and massive as they always were, what inspired the more recent support of these issues was Barack Obama. And black people were supporting the black president. They didn't necessarily agree with it, but he was the black president. He gave them recommendations to support this because he did, and black people jumped on board. Michelle Obama could do wrong, and even when they did wrong, they could do no wrong. Black people could be very protecting of black leaders of what is happening to us. I think the uncomfortability, the anxiety, and the questioning of the value of same-gender love trans people is just as alive and well and potent and massive as was. In my career, I travel the nation all the time and perpetual engagement with black communities around these issues and others. And the concern or the anxiety or the dissonance with it is alive. But Barack Obama was one who created a vote opportunity for black people to utilize to create the image of support. But it's still of misinformation and ignorance, because I'll close this tangent by reiterating that we as a collective level have not engaged this issue. And when we do engage it, it's from a white, from my perspective, LGBTQ and queer and all that stuff is a white, culturally, symbolically, ethics level, white frame of reference. And a white frame of reference regarding who we are as Black people who took a chance does not help us. And that frame of reference has limited Black engagement on this issue because it's not happening from a Black or Black-centered perspective, and that's probably.
Okay. Thank you, Cleo. We got the bulk of it mostly, and I just kind of want to recap because you were going in and out. You were going in and out, Cleo. Your signal was dropping you in and out a little bit. You may want to go off and come back on, but if not, if you can get that signal to be strong. I want to just kind of recap what Cleo was saying, was that he said first initially that he did not feel that Dave Chappelle should be the one who is responsible to, create or launch a platform on Netflix for the SGLBT community, or the Black SGLBT community in particular, and that, we as a community should create that platform for ourselves, which I love that idea. Netflix, if you're listening, we want to come on your network and have this discussion. We can have the same panelists that are here right now and a few others, but we would love to have this discussion on a wider platform. Cleo also talked about the paradigm of what represents symbolically and culturally white LGBT mainstream culture. And one of the things Cleo talks a lot about in his work is the racism, subtle and sometimes blatant racism that permeates mainstream white LGBT culture. Now, that's another workshop. We need to do that one too. But tonight we're here to talk about the Dave Chappelle special, The Closer. So hopefully we can get some more insight from you, Cleo. I have some more questions that I can't wait to hear your answer, and your answer, Michael, too. But now I want to go to you, Jayla, and pose the same exact question. Do you feel that Dave Chappelle's statements promote or support violence and intolerance against trans and or LGBT, SGLBT people? And again, I ask you to please use specific comments or jokes that you felt promoted a spirit and an energy of violence or oppression or even discrimination. And one of the things that Michael said was that he didn't feel like it necessarily promoted violence. He felt like his comments made the trans community, the LGBT and LGBT people as a whole, that it caused them to be viewed less humanely. So I thought that was a very interesting dynamic, that it's not, that he's promoting violence, which I agree with. I don't believe that he's been promoting violence or oppression either. But I think that this is a great discussion for us to have. Jayla, it's on you. What are your thoughts on this question?
I definitely don't think it is something that he's done on purpose. With the work that I've done after all these years, I've learned to be careful with bringing up certain conversations or questions and not being able to frame what the answers should look like. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you can bring up questions, but bringing up certain questions without having to add a counterbalance to it can create those issues and those scenarios where violence can happen. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, I think to the special, when he talked about getting into an altercation with this lesbian woman who he was talking to, I believe it was her girlfriend, and they were having this conversation, and from the outside looking in, it may have looked like there was something more going on. And this, in the way he describes the woman that basically got in his face was more masculine identified and had this type of energy and jumped in his face and had this type of what I call the meaning aggression, where it's aggressive, but it's like I'm talking down to you as a person and I'm trying to assert my power and dominance. And he's in this altercation in this situation. And he talks about this physical interaction that happens. I understand it from a place of being a Black person and understanding what happens when someone gets in your face, and this instance of I need to protect myself and all of that. From someone else who's looking on the outside, not understanding that, they may look at it as, oh, like somebody get in your face, you do this and you do that, and there's this fight, there's this instance, and it seems like it's okay. With it may seem okay without the context of understanding what it's like going through life, living life as a black man going through society, and having people view you a certain way and people treating you a certain way. So this person, I can't speak for that person, but I know for me and my experiences as the time I walked through life as a black man, and I am a trans woman now, but that doesn't negate my past experience of walking through life as a black man and having people view me as aggressive or thinking certain things about me, and they treat me accordingly. And in that moment, I have to, it is a stereotype, but I have to rise to that occasion in order to protect myself.
Yes.
Those things have happened. And so I understand it from that perspective, but someone who doesn't come with that understanding, they're going to miss the point totally.
Yes. Yes.
I think a lot of what Dave Chappelle did through this special was creating conversation and bringing up issues around race and gender and sexuality to some extent. But what was missing from the special, I think, was that in it, Dave Chappelle wasn't talking to me as a black trans person. As a black trans woman, it was not talking to me. My experiences were not a part of this. It was the experience of from the white LGBTQ community and the black community. There was not a space in the middle of the black LGBTQ community. And I think he talked about that. He said, my issue was never with with this was with white people. That's what he said.
He did say
and so he was speaking from, I got it through that lens, that he was speaking from the white LGBTQ community and the type of power that they have and around counseling people and affecting people's careers and all of that, and how that affects him as a comedian and expressing his art, and especially being a black man and experiencing life that way. But there was not that space of talking about the intersectionality of being a black LGBTQ plus person. And so because of that, I've been able to watch his specials, and this is not the first time he's brought up subject matter like this. I've been able to watch and laugh and understand, because I understand what it's like to be oppressed by the LGBTQ community, specifically the white LGBTQ community, and the racism that exists within the community. And I also understand what it's like walking through life as a black person. And so I think what is happening, what I've seen in some of the different chat rooms and online, is that when this conversation is being had amongst just what we call our folk, then that's like, okay, well, you're a part of them. You're a part of the LGBTQ community. And yes, I am a part of them. But yes, I'm also a part of y'all as well. We are one. And I can't negate either part of my existence of being a trans person or being a black person. And because I live at that intersection, then I have to be kind of, it becomes very tiresome, because then you have to be the go-between between the two. And so a lot of times, like, you have to pick. Well, I'm gonna pick. I have to go with the people that I live with each and every day, which is my black people, and have to have these conversations. But at the same time, there is the responsibility on my part to then have these conversations with the larger LGBT community and get them to understand things from a different perspective than just their own.
Very true.
But also asking them to step outside of their privilege as well, which can be extremely hard to do.
Ooh, speak on it. Yes, thank you. Oh man, I know Cleo's over there like lit up. You're talking about some of the stuff that he educates community on often. I'm going to come back to you, Michael, and ask you, do you think that racism in the mainstream LGBT community is real? And if so, did racism, in your opinion, affect how Chappelle's stand-up routine was received in this show and previous shows? Because that was one of Dave's statements, is that he felt as a black man and as a black comedian that he was received in a certain light. That, that had he been a white comedian doing the same comedy he would not have been denounced. And he gave some examples about other people and entertainers who had done similar things, and had not been denounced, or had their show requested their show be boycotted or canceled. So do you think that the attack on him is partially because of racism in the mainstream LGBT community? And do you believe race impacted how the show was viewed, Michael?
Okay, there was a lot in that question,
Yeah,
so
lots
I'm
of
gonna try.
facts.
So I'm gonna try to remember all the pieces of the question
Yeah,
and share what I think.
yeah.
So yes, there is racism in the LGBT community, right? Like no one can deny that. There is racism in every single aspect of American culture, and why should the LGBT community be any different? Um, just look at the log cabin Republicans who are pro-Trump, and majority white with a few Latinos sprinkled in, I guess, for flavor. So I think that there is an element of truth to what Davis said about how he is viewed because he's Black. I think there's an element of truth there. Jayla talked about it a bit, about how I'm not going to say just Black men, but Black people
Mm,
are viewed. We're
mm,
viewed as more aggressive.
mm,
We're viewed as loud. We're viewed as ignorant and not as cultured,
mm,
and a whole bunch of other things, right? Like
mm,
there is an element of that that I believe to be true.
mm,
I
mm,
also believe that Dave is using that in part as a shield
mm, mm,
to justify his failure to, as Jayla pointed out, acknowledge that it's not just the white LGBT community and then all the Black folks who are straight and cisgender,
mm,
right?
mm,
He
mm,
completely ignores those of us who are both, and you see it when he talks about it. He talks about white gay people, or he talks about gay people as if they're all white, and he talks about Black people as if they're all straight and as if we are all straight and cisgender. When I'm not sure about the sexual orientation or gender identity of everybody who's a part of this panel right now, but there are at least a few of us who are at that intersection. And
mm,
I think that a part of, as I said, a part of what Dave said is true. A part of what I believe that what he said is a shield.
mm,
And I think that if Dave was really serious about having that conversation, we could go there with him. But in order to do that, he should recognize and acknowledge that there are Black LGBTQ people, same gender loving, whatever term that you want to use, but that we actually exist.
mm,
And when he is talking about whether it's trans women or whatever progress the LGBT community has made, as though those of us who are Black and LGBTQ, same gender loving, etc., are just not there. He is denying an important part of the Black communities,
mm,
right? Because
mm,
one of the things that we've talked about, not on this show, but in the larger context, especially among Black folks, is that Black lives matter.
mm,
And to me, that means that all Black lives matter,
mm,
right? And as Issa Rae said, I'm rooting for everybody Black.
mm.
That includes Black LGBTQ, same gender loving people. It includes Black trans women. It
Mm.
includes Dave. I mean, there's an asterisk when it comes to people
Okay.
like Candace Owens,
Wow,
but
that's
but
another show. We're going to do that one too.
yeah.
Yes.
But I firmly believe that all Black lives matter, and I'm rooting for all of us.
Mm,
And so when I come from when I think and when I write, I'm not thinking just about Black men, even though I am a Black man. I'm thinking about the totality of the community, and
mm,
I'll also admit that there are things that I get wrong and places where I'm still growing and learning and evolving,
okay.
which is one of the reasons I'm appreciating this conversation right now. So I think Dave makes a point about racism in the LGBT community and how he's viewed as a Black man who's making provocative and edgy comedy.
Yeah.
But he also has a blind spot when it comes to Black LGBTQ same gender loving people, and it doesn't help him to use this almost as a shield
Mm.
to defend himself from accusations of transphobia and homophobia.
Interesting. Very interesting perspective. Before we go to you, Cleo, I want to read one of the comments in our chat. We have a lot of people who are tuned in that are watching us right now. So I just want to welcome everybody. I want to welcome you, House of Pinky, Pinky Dewberry Juice, and welcome Oyalade Kandaki. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for spreading the word. Ia Omanike Segun, thank you for sharing. Welcome to the window. Want to thank D Pepper Massey, Your World TV, I Do Lawo TV, and so many of our viewers. And I have a comment I want to read by Danielle Young Combo, which says, I think Dave was trying to cancel culture and invite meaningful discussion around a very sensitive topic. Comedians are meant to push the envelope. No one is safe. It takes tremendous talent to pull that off, and I think he did. So interesting sentiment there as well about, canceling cancel culture, because we know that you said at the beginning of the show, Michael, and I agree with you, that it is non-productive in most cases, unless we're dealing with something that there is no redemptive qualities therein. So yeah, very powerful statements. Thank you, Danielle, and welcome to the window. Cleo Manago, I know that you have been a proponent. One of the things that you spoke on earlier is you talked about and there's so many beautiful pieces here, because I hadn't really thought about the idea that Black SGLBT people, weren't being seen in this discussion. And I understand Michael's sentiments that he felt that, Black folks, that our Blackness, LGBT people, SGLBT people's Blackness was being used as a shield, because, some of us are protecting him because he's a Black leader, a Black celebrity. He's done phenomenal work at creating consciousness and awareness around race and racism. So a lot of us stood up for him and stand up for him because of that. Now, I don't know him personally. I don't know. He may have a best friend that is a Black SGLBT person. I don't know. But from the outside looking in, I totally understand how he can be perceived as connected to, having this deep and powerful connection to a white trans woman, which he did. I mean, and we're going to talk about that later on in the show, about that connection, because I thought it was really profound. That was one of the things that really touched me about the show, was how he had forged that connection, how he had opened up an authentic dialogue on stage, an impromptu discussion, much like we're having tonight, an unscripted discussion where, she was able to talk back and forth with this mega Black star, where he put her in a position to shine. He gave her an opportunity to give a platform to her talent, and then even created a fund for her children after she took her own life. As a result, he thinks of being targeted and victimized by what he calls the gay mafia. So, Cleo, that question that I just presented to the other two panelists, would you speak to what you think about racism and the mainstream LGBT community? Do you think that it affected how people viewed Dave Chappelle's stand-up show, The Closer? Cleo Manago.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, nice and clear.
Okay. I hope to have another conversation with you all and with Mike and Jayla, because Michael and Jayla. This is a great panel. This is a great discussion, and I'm having technical difficulties. But anyway, I differ with Michael in that his conclusion that same gender loving people were excluded. I'm going to try to give a short story to make my point. I was a guest speaker at an Ivy League university in Long Island, and I went to talk to the faculty, the Black faculty, about guiding Black students or living their lives in ways that affirm and benefit and make sure they're an asset to Black people, and not just becoming a neutral American scholar that goes to live in a white neighborhood and be of no use in a direct sense to Black people anymore, which is what happens to a lot of people who go to college. They leave and go someplace. And by being a guest speaker was to talk to Black people and Black faculty who are in a position to inspire, to get them to consider that, because Black kids are doing it, the Asian kids are doing it, the Jewish kids are doing it. Condition to look at it for Black people as anti and contraband. So we back off of that, and that's another show. And when I was speaking to the audience, a Black woman got up who in white gear, and I mean by white gay gear is rainbow flags, triangles, and all the whole thing that white gays have made symbolic of their movement. And she said, "You forgot somebody." Now, she assumed, like people always do when they meet me, that I was a heterosexual man. She didn't know I was SGL. So she got up and she said, "You forgot somebody. Your conversation is not inclusive. You forgot the LGBTQ community." Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And I said, when you bought off that belt that you had on, did you go to an LGBTQ rack to get that belt, or did you go to the belt rack and got needed? And she said, she looked at me sideways because she was invested in me being wrong and bad, and that was some anti-Black male energy that she had. And she paused, and I said, my point is that when I say Black, I'm talking about you. Now, I haven't finished my presentation yet, so I haven't said all the alphabet soup or everybody explicitly yet. I haven't said male or female or men and women yet either. I said Black. And when I said Black people, I wasn't excluding men and women. Matter of fact, I include same-gender loving, bisexual, men and women, everybody who's under the rubric of Black. So you were not excluded. Now, you might want some special attention from me because you want that, but you were not excluded. When I said Black, you look real Black to me, like you just fell out of Africa. I was talking about you too. And I think, like me, David Chappelle looks at LGBTQ as a white phenomenon, because it is. Not being homosexual. Being homosexual and bisexual is not a white phenomenon. It's a human phenomenon. Believes the LGBTQ paradigm by thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and I got proof. But gay is about 60 years old. Lesbian is a little bit less, and LGBTQ as a spectrum in terms of a descriptor is less than 20 years old. But being a human being goes way before it even came into existence. I'm real clear about that and got the receipts. I believe that David Chappelle sees Black people as inclusive, as diverse, and separates the white paradigm from us because it is a white supremacist paradigm. It is built around Greece, Paris, and Rome, and with the word queer, which is a British slang term, which has just been added. It's all about white ethos and white indigenous whiteness as well as U.S. whiteness. So I don't agree with Michael in terms of what he thinks is going on with. If I was doing a comedy special, and I'm a homosexual with a boyfriend, if I was doing a comedy special like David Chappelle, it would have been the same way when it came to talk about white LGBTQ people. So let me just say that as a separate thing from Black people. The other thing I want to mention too, which bothers me about some of these gay critiques, is that the B word and the N word is equally dehumanizing to human beings called Black, equally. And what was bothering me also during his show, along with the things he said about trans people, that bothered me. I was bothered by some of the things that he said that showed a clear bias or critique of trans people. But I was constantly being hit in the head by the N word and the B word. And the gay white paradigmatic tendency is to get homosexual Black people to jump on their bandwagon and complain about homophobia and forget about Blackophobia. And that really bothers me because that's a white supremacist imprint on the Black psyche. And in this instance, the homosexual, bisexual, and trans Black psyche.
Very powerful and poignant points. And I really understand. I know when I had done a presentation at Columbia University years ago as part of a conference on African spirituality, and I wrote a paper that was published called Living with Dual Spirits, the ritual role of same-gender love and bisexual and trans people in indigenous communities. And I talked about the indigenous names for SGLBT people prior to westernization. And I mean, it was a powerful healing for me, and a lot of that work, had for me was inspired by the legacy that you created, Cleo, in teaching people, particularly people of African descent, that they didn't have to abandon their ancestral traditions and culture to embrace being same gender loving. So that was a powerful place for me. It's a place of great gratitude for me that I learned that lesson very early on in my journey. And I do identify as a same gender loving woman. And so that was a very powerful piece. So this idea of blackness now coming into play as we discuss the controversial television show. If you're just tuning in, you're watching The Window. My name is Love TaShia Asanti. If you want to learn more about the work that we do, you can go to www.officialtashiaasanti.com or www.nobletrinityenterprises.com. We're in our third season of The Window. We've done many shows of this nature. This is part one of the discussion. I'm sure of that tonight. We're going to need to come back and talk about this some more. I want to just welcome you, and I want to read a few of the comments. Walker Beverly just commented. He said, there was no problem when Dave talked about Black people, but as soon as he talked about others, there was a problem. I guess in the others, he's talking about LGBT people. Same as Gruden, his first emails was about racism, not released. But as soon as they found more emails about others, he is released immediately. What I'm saying is there is no problem when you talk about Black people, but as soon as you talk about others, problem. I believe this is what Dave was trying to get across. Also, we can't assume what Dave's mind was thinking. Very good point. Very good point. So again, Walker confirming and speaking to the question I just posed to the panel was, do we think that race played a key role in how this particular show was received and some of the other ones? And then another Facebook user says, absolutely, Cleo. In America, European culture, race trumps everything, including gender and sexual orientation. So another powerful piece. And so if you want to know more about these panelists, family, because these are all some amazing panelists that are on with us tonight. I believe D. Pepper Massey, a producer for Your World TV, posted the links to Michael's editorial. Please go and support him. Comment on his article. Say you loved it. You're glad that he wrote it. If you have differing opinions, that's fine. But at least we want to show readership and support of writers and op-ed writers for these major publications. You can also research amasi.com and the amazing and iconic work that Cleo has done. His organization has been a model for many of the flagship organizations that are in operation today. His Amasi centers set the model for that. And Jayla as well. I don't know if you have a website representing the work that you do. If you do, please post it in the thread or send it to us and we'll post it in the thread. People want to get in touch with you, invite you to be a speaker. I want to thank you all again. So we have a few more, and this is one of the biggest ones. One of the most poignant pieces of the closer was, to me, the bridge that was created between the Black community as a whole and the trans community by the interchange between Dave and the late Daphne Dorman. We've been talking about her throughout this telecast. And I mean, not only did Dave invite Daphne to open for his Bay Area shows, sadly, after she committed suicide. And again, what Dave said in the show was he felt that, because he was used to taking the heat. He's been a public person for many, many years. But she, unlike him, was not familiar with, being attacked on social media, which can be, that's a whole other show. It can be so traumatizing and painful when people, say all kinds of stuff that's not even true about you, but it happens all the time. So she was so impacted by this that he believes that's why she committed suicide and took her life. So he took it upon himself to start a fund for her kid. But even before she died, they had such a rich relationship from the moment he said, when she stood up to him when he was on that stage, and he said what she basically said, what I want is for the world to see my humanity and to see that, I'm a human being having an experience like everybody else. And even when I talk about it now, it just gives me chills, because he said in that moment, as a black straight, man, he got it. He got that, even though she was a white trans woman having a very different experience than him, which he said too. He said, I realized I didn't know what she was talking about because I had never walked in a body or an experience like hers, but he understood the notion of her humanity, because he understood what it was like for him and all the things that, our black men go through every day, just because they're walking in a black male body, from the racial profiling, from the, misuse of police power, from, the murders and, rates of imprisonment and illness, all of those things. The black men, of course, black women and black youth go through, it touched him because he got it in that moment. And it shifted the way that he related to her going forward, and the trans community as a whole, and his views on that. And so I thought it was also moving that he put up in the closing pictures, the images on the film. If you watch it, I don't know if everybody's seen it who's on the show with us now. He puts up images. He has Trans Life Matters. He, of course, has Black Life Matters. He has images of the Village People, that, big singing group that was, like the gay mantra. He put an image up of them. And to the credit of the panelists, you're right. I really didn't see images of Black same gender loving people in that montage. And I think that it's true that, mainstream Black America often do see LGBT, same gender loving, bisexual, and trans people through the lens, because they control the media, because they have the mainstream, the rule of the mainstream, because of racism. I believe that Black SGLBT people are seen through the lens of the mainstream LGBT people. So often when I see some of those images, I go, that ain't me. That's none of the people that I know, that I grew up with. And I remember it was one list I was on. I was like, y'all need to talk to Cleo Manago. You need to talk to Valerie Spencer. Like, I was going through my list of powerhouse, Black folks that I felt, just had such a different image of what they saw, because all they saw was rainbow flags and, dots on people's nipples. Like, they didn't see the Jimmy Baldwins or the Lorraine Hansberrys. They didn't see those people. They didn't see the Cleo Managos or the Jeffrey Kings or the Azan Kamals. They didn't see any of those faces, or the TaShia Asantis, right? They didn't see the mothers and the grandmothers and the elders and the community leaders and organizers and all of that rich, beautiful work that Black folks do. That, we're the same people caring for the elders and the children that other people abandon in our families. They didn't see those images of us. So all they saw us through was the lens of the big party. Yes, I think that's Cleo coming in.
Yeah.
Yes.
I saw, this might be slightly controversial.
Yes.
I'm going to say it anyway. I saw the images of that follow the closer. And there was indeed some Black same-gender loving people in those images. However, they didn't have rainbow flags on like me. And you ain't never, ever, 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 ever in your entire life going to see me with a rainbow flag on or any of that white stuff. It ain't never going to happen.
Okay.
But there were people, but they were not identified as such. They were just being Black.
Ah. Okay. So
you and I both, TaShia, used to be in the business. I used to be in the business. And since being in the entertainment business, which is a long time ago, I've become a confidant to a number of famous same-gender loving people, both living and dead. Mm-hmm. And there's people who are very, very famous who do not want to be there. Like, well, there's one woman, I'm not going to say her name, but you guys are probably going to figure out who she is. Mm-hmm. There's a Black woman who has a monarchy-like name, who is about Black people and is not upset or in the closet at all about her sexuality in terms of her walking down the street with her partner and everything, but she does not identify with LGBTQ.
Mm.
And one time she did a concert at the Gay Pride Long Beach Festival, and she went there to support it. The next day, the white gay community jumped all over to say so and so came out, and she corrected them and said, "No, I didn't. Wait, no, I did not come out. I supported you."
Mm.
And what she meant by that, and there's others who've done the same thing, including Frank Ocean, who they tried to give awards to after he talked about his love story with a man, and then invited him to an award ceremony to pick up an award to be part of the white gay collective, and he didn't show up.
Mm. Mm.
And see, our lens is so white and gay LGBT that we don't even know how to ponder the Black experience. Before gay, we were called one of the children. Michael, I don't know if Michael was old enough to remember that.
I remember that's a archbishop term too.
We were called one of the children. We were called, "Are you in the life?" You know, and we had terms that were more nurturing. Are you family? And that built more community between us that has been interrupted by the gay, lesbian, Greek lesbos invasion. And I'm not having it. I'm a same-loving man who's been fine with my sexuality for over half a century. But but Black people have another experience. It's another paradigm that Moms Mabley came out of, and that sister that Viola Davis just portrayed in film, who was bisexual. She never heard the terms LGBTQ in her life.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
But she loved women. And we have a whole Black culture. Read the interview with James Baldwin that was in the Village Voice. If you go online and write Village Voice James Baldwin, he talks
somebody can post that. That would be awesome.
He talks about his disassociation and dissonance with gay because he found it racist. But he wasn't in the closet. He was an out homosexual. And the gay community tried to drag him into their movement because of his notoriety. And he said, basically, not while you're as racist and white as you are, I'm not coming. And that whole story where there's documentation is not talked about. All we hear about is the white invasion of LGBTQ, and the most recent imposition is queer. I'll close this tangent with reiterating that there's a Black experience in this country that's several hundred years old. There's an African experience that affirms gender nuance in Black people that's thousands of years old, that we're so busy running behind Ellen DeGeneres, Elton John, and Harry Hay, who's a white man that created the gay movement, that we don't know nothing about ourselves. And that is as dangerous to us as the word and the B word. We need to learn to love ourselves and our image to heal and stay resonant the rest of the Black community.
All right. Thank you, Cleo. Powerful sentiments. Powerful sentiments. Well, that leads me to our last question. And that was, how did you as panelists view Dave's experience and growth in understanding the experience and struggles of trans people and LGBT people with discrimination and sometimes violent attacks? And before you answer them, start with you, Michael. We'll go to you, Jayla, and then back to Cleo for closing comments. I want to read some of these comments in the chat. Oh, thank you. Your World TV just posted the link. If y'all want to read Michael Crawford's editorial, it's posted there. And I think somebody's going to Google that story that Cleo just spoke about, so we can check that out. That's a powerful piece. I'm going to read some of these comments. Valerie Spencer says, she says, I can assume based on continual focus on trans women specifically, we were an easy and convenient to target, and so he did. But the consciousness has changed, and now there is backlash. So Valerie was speaking about, and if you don't know Valerie Spencer, she's also one of the iconic educators, advocates, and activists for the rights of trans people, trans women here in Southern California. We go probably 25, 30 years back. Of course, I'm only 30 years old, in real life, but we've been knowing each other a very long time. But powerful, powerful statement that, Valerie says that she feels that it was a easy target, that trans women were an easy target. D. Pepper Massey writes, you don't think it's because of the backlash from a special number two that can be focused on trans women. You don't think it's because of the backlash? Okay, if you could expand on that. Oh, and D. Pepper Massey says there was an image of Sylvester. You're right. I forgot about that. Sylvester was in the montage that Dave put at the end of his film. Thank you for that. Ifashina Tamika Clear writes, I actually really respect what he's saying. And I think she's talking about Cleo, about the way Black folks talk about gender and sexuality. Absolutely, absolutely. Pinky Dewberry Juice writes, I agree with Cleo on a different experience. And Ifashina says, we have our own way of talking about these things. And I think Dave could have broke the code talking like how we talk to an audience that does not have the bandwidth to meet us. Very good point. And Pinky writes, not knowing about yourself is more of a threat. Cleo Manago. Oh, she's quoting Cleo. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And Jayla, oh, there's Jayla's bio there posted. If you want to find Jayla, they are on Facebook. A very out, very vocal person, does, beautiful, beautiful images, always sharing beautiful images of trans life and trans awakening and from an African perspective. So awesomeness. Please, please follow these individuals. So we have a one last question, which is, and I want to just kind of fast forward to this issue around racism in the LGBT community and the ways in which it impacts LGBT people of color and Black people as a whole. I mean, because it's not, we know that racism is definitely not a Black LGBT issue. It is a humanity issue. It is, in fact, it affects non-Black people, affects all people in the world negatively. So the question is, do you think Dave's experiences and growth, do you think he grew? Do you think he had some awareness that he got as a result of interacting with Daphne Gorman, an openly trans woman, white woman, in his understanding of the trans people's experiences and struggles, as well as their brilliance and victory? Because we, of course, we don't want anybody to be viewed through just their struggles, because there's brilliance across the board in all those communities. So do you think Dave grew? Do you think he widened his understanding of the SGLBT struggle? Anybody? Let's start with you, Jayla, then we'll go to you, Michael, and close with Cleo.
One of the key things that I heard him say towards the end of the special was he said, empathy, excuse me, he said, empathy is bi. It goes both ways. He talked about being able to, when she was able to express, I just want someone to see me for my humanity. There was a part of him that recognized that and could empathize with that the oppression you face through life and the issues that you're facing, while I don't face those exact issues, I can understand it, because me walking through my Black experience through life, I can understand what oppression feels like to me, and how people don't understand, and how that affects my life and my walk. So I don't know if that was actually like some part of like where he just grew and he just had this certain. I do believe there was a light bulb, but I've never believed that he was just like this bad person. He just didn't understand. In watching the previous specials, there was some understanding that was there. I think in this one, he just had the ability to express that in a way that he wasn't able to do so in the other ones, by having this experience to talk about with this person, to be able to have that be the conduit to express how he understands now and to express his feelings.
Powerful.
In speaking to racism, I definitely believe that in my Black trans existence, that in my body lives the bridge between. So for me, in my walking in the community and how I've been able to express myself, I've always have believed that as being someone who was Black and a part of the LGBT community, that it was my responsibility to create those conversations and those bridges for understanding. I felt like it was a responsibility, because here I was with the family and the communities that I grew up in, my church, things like that. And hearing the things that they talked about, I was able to then express it to them in a way that they could understand. This is my life that you're talking about. You're looking at this issue as if it is an other person issue. This doesn't affect you. But here I am, this black trans person that's sitting at the dinner table. It affects you because how do you love me? How do you embrace me? How do you incorporate me into the family, into the community? And so that's the bridge that lives inside of my body. But in a special like this, I think it created, instead of a bridge of being there, it created this sense of tug of war. It was a fight over my existence. Are you going to be a black person? Or are you going to be a trans person? Are you going to be part of the LGBT community? It became a fight for the soul of who I am. And then it kind of put me into my own little box of there's not going to be a fight over who I am. I am both. And as such, it almost as if I am the Rosetta Stone. I have to be that sense of consciousness and voice to be able to explain that's a lot of work, to be honest. It's a lot of work to have to be that person to explain. And sometimes it gets a little tiresome, but that's where luckily I have my allies who I call assassins who are able to have that ability to be able to speak on some of those things, to come into the community and understand and hear the stories and then go back and do work. And so I leave with that. Empathy is it goes both ways. We have to be able to understand each other, and with the ideal of racism and how that impacts all of our lives, we have to understand our humanity first. That is who we are first. We're humans. And how do we work from that place of understanding that we are one?
Powerful. Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Jayla. And I want to just go to the comments real quick before we go to you, Michael. And D. Pepper writes, the trans community attacked him after the second special. So in this final special. So after the second special and this final special. So she was speaking about the attack that she felt that Dave Chappelle was attacked by the trans community. Okay. And then Ifashina Tamika Clear writes, no, I think he was shocked to see that white folks could be treated just as badly as black folks. I think it expanded his view on how oppression works, yet he has not connected how multiple oppressions work. Interesting point, which is limiting and unfortunate the way most people come to understand oppression more completely. So, I see what you're saying. You're saying that that's how people come to understand oppression is through multiple oppressions and what that's like to face multiple oppressions. Very interesting piece there. Okay. And Denise Pitts, hey, blessings, family. Denise Pitts writes, I find, at least in my experience, that the LGBT community can be the most segregated group of people. To break it down even further, the lesbian community, more than the rest. Racism is very present in this community. And D. Pepper writes, my experience as well. So I know we need to have part two. We got to talk about this. And that's a real issue. What does that look like when you are, in a community where you think you should be safe from discrimination and oppression, but face both blatant discrimination and racism, as well as overt racism? What does that look like? How do you cope with it? And what are tools to overcome it? Okay, so yeah, very, very real. Michael,
Yes.
you wrote I loved your piece. I mean, it was just so much meat. I wish we could just have a time to just go over the things that you wrote, because you talked about that multiple layers of oppression in your editorial, in your op-ed on NBCnews.com. You talked about, but I love that you left that, that redemptive quality, that restorative, idea and hope at the end of your editorial, that, we could use this as an opportunity, which Jayla and I were having a very great conversation earlier today about this show, and we were talking about, that instead of using cancel culture to deal with these type experiences, that we should use them, as a way, just like with the baby, like to create opportunities for further discourse and dialogue, that there are rich opportunities that cancel culture gives us no chance to pursue. So you talked about that in your editorial. What do you think are some of the actions that we can take to heal the victims and survivors of racism?
So
And
I want to.
yeah, and I know you want to talk about that other question. You're like, wait, no, TaShia. Okay, let me back up. How can you talk about if you believe that Dave grew from this experience? If you believe that he expanded his understanding of the trans and LGBT, SGLBT experience? Can you speak to that first? And then we're going to get into what we can do to heal from racism.
Yes, I can speak on that. First, I want to say I really appreciate this conversation, hearing the differing points of views, and Cleo acknowledging points where he disagrees with thoughts that I have, and I think that's important. And I'm grateful for this space for us to have this conversation. I want to pick up on something that Jayla said about empathy empathy being bi, it goes both ways.
Mm.
And that's the thing that I would actually say to Dave Chappelle. Right? If you want LGBTQ people, and when I say that, I mean all of us, all races, etc., to show you empathy, then you should also show us empathy. I think that the question around whether or not Dave has grown, I think he may have grown a bit in the context of that relationship with Daphne Dorfman. But what he hasn't been able to do is to take whatever connection he may have had with her and extend that to trans women, trans people more broadly, and then to the broader LGBT community. Because it's great that he had this relationship with Ms. Dorfman, but at the same time in this special, he identified himself as Team TERF and basically questioned the existence of trans people. You can't say, on the one hand, I've grown because I've developed a relationship with this one individual. At the same time, you question the humanity of an entire community.
Mm.
And where I stand is, one, I want to acknowledge what Jayla was saying about seeing themselves as a bridge, and that they're being almost like this tug of war over different aspects of their being. That is exhausting. That is exhausting, and it shouldn't be a position that Jayla and other people who are Black and same gender loving, Black and trans, or whatever the intersecting identities may be. It should not be a position that we're put in. So for us, it's kind of like the way that I think about. Like Dylan Roof, who went into the Black church, I believe, in North Carolina, and killed 9 Black people.
Mm-hmm.
He entered into their church, and like good Black church folks, they're like they welcomed him in. You go into a Black church, they're going to take care of you, right? My grandma was a part of the same church for like 50 years, and anybody who went in, she would take care of them. And at the same time, almost immediately after he was taken to Burger King en route to going to jail, there were calls in the media from white commentators, white journalists, white people generally, expecting that the Black community should forgive him. We were asked to extend a level of grace to a white murderer that is rarely, if ever, extended to us.
Yes.
And so when we talk about empathy being bi and it needing to go both ways, it genuinely needs to go both ways. It shouldn't be Black LGBTQ queer folks, same gender loving folks, trans folks, etc., doing the bulk of the work to actually get us where we need to be. That there has to be an opening, an openness on the part of folks not like Dave, but also other folks of the Black community who
Mm.
may feel uncomfortable or don't understand, same gender loving folks and trans folks, etc. There has to be an opening for us to create a stronger inter-community experience where I think a number of folks have talked about our common humanity and seeing ourselves as humans first.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I think that that is important work that we need to be doing within the Black communities,
Mm.
right? It will make us stronger. It will make us more vibrant, and it really will mean that we are that Black family.
Mm.
And Cleo, I am actually old enough to remember the children and the family and all of that. I wish I could say, oh wow, these are new terms. I haven't heard them because I'm so young, but it's actually not the
You just
case.
look young. There you go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Angela Bassett, Black folks, it's real,
They're good.
and so
They're good Black.
yeah, and so like I closed up my op-ed piece by stating clearly, I don't want Dave to be canceled, right? I don't want any. Well, I was going to say I don't want anybody to be canceled, but then I thought of Donald Trump, and I definitely want him
That
to be
part.
canceled.
That part.
I don't want Dave to be canceled. What I want Dave to do is to evolve and tell better jokes. He can make jokes about, white LGBTQ folks. He can make jokes. I don't want to say he can make jokes about trans people because I'm not trans and I don't want to overextend my bounds. But I think that there are really good jokes to be made about us, right? Like we are a lot. And there are a lot of avenues for really smart, stinging critique of LGBTQ people, of white LGBTQ people, that can be made. And I think Dave is taking the easy route.
Mm.
And so, he's shown a real bracing wit around issues of race. And I would love it if he expressed that same bracing wit around LGBTQ issues in a way that does not dehumanize and question the humanity of LGBTQ people and trans women especially.
And I thank you for that. And I really want y'all to think about, especially in part 2, what things you believe he said that were dehumanizing. Now, I watched the special twice because I didn't want to miss anything for this series. So I really watched it and I took notes. And, and I thought that, he made some really funny jokes about LGBT people as a whole. I mean, like there was one he talked about how the look of surprise that, just like a expression when, one of the children is talking some drama, like he made an express, and it was so real. It was like so accurate. And it's not just Black, same gender loving men. It's women too who will get that look of surprise and like, I wish somebody would do this. So he captured that. To me, it was so real. And then I remember he made a comment on a point in a trans woman's life where he felt that they weren't looking feminine enough. That to me was a negative statement. I think that can be a tough, just having worked with and supported and been a part of so many trans women coming into themselves and their process of transitioning. I know that that's a very sensitive and delicate time and period, and so that could be, to me, was something that could be very hurtful and hard to hear. Now, have comedians said that and way worse about everybody else? Absolutely. Dave, Martin Lawrence, and on and on and on and on, make comments about thick women, little women, big people, young people, old people, people of all races. It's like that's their job. That's what they do. And I've had to and some of it I'm like, ooh, ouch, that hurt. I've been in audiences because I love comedy and I go to a lot of comedy shows. So I've been in an audience where there's one guy who shall remain nameless. And to me, he said some jokes that were really in poor taste, like jokes about child abuse and abuse of women. Like, to me, those are off limits. There is no joke in domestic violence. I'm sorry. Beating up on a woman is never funny. Now, Mike Epps sometimes crosses the line with that because he talks about him and his wife beating each other up. and that they fall out. And he makes a joke about when the police came. He's like, well, you gonna go this time or you gonna go this time, and still it's not funny, but I understand what he's saying and how he and her found the humor in it. But again, it can take away from the seriousness of domestic violence and that people die from that. They get killed, they lose their life. People are damaged, children are damaged from it. Same thing with, sexual assault. Like, to me, that's not a joke. I don't care how you cut it. Slavery is not a joke, even though people have found humorous aspects of it. And so it's been a great medicine for me. Comedy is a great medicine to help us get through these difficult times. But again, how do we come back? How do we find balance with it? How do we, create those boundaries that don't censor people? And Dave, with his gifts, and I know, Cleo, I'm going to have you close us out. Dave has been one who has championed issues of racial oppression in his comedy. He has used his platforms to bring light to all kinds of oppression and discrimination, and even just showed us how insane some of the things that happen in the everyday world are through his comedy and through his parodies in particular. So I can't see taking that away from him, but I definitely think, balance is important and sensitivity is important, and to understand and you talked about this, Michael, in your editorial, the undercurrents that can be created by certain statements. And I know, because I've been through it as a same gender loving woman. I've had that experience where people have said things, when I was writing a column for the Lesbian News for 13 years, I received death threats. So I know how crazy and insane this thing can get. But I want to say for the record that I don't believe and have never believed it was Dave's intention to promote violence or attacks against same gender loving, bisexual, and trans people. Even before he became more aware, I don't think that was his intention. But I'm not in his heart. I never sat down and talked with him. I'm merely going by what I was able to pick up from his comments and statements. I do know what my enemies look like, and I don't feel like he is the enemy that the SGLBT should be attacking and focusing all our energy on destroying and taking down. I don't think that's where we should be putting all that energy, because there's way more enemies that we need to be very afraid of. And in my opinion, in my humble opinion, he's not it. So with that, I'm going to go to you, Cleo, to close us out. I want to thank all of our panelists. I'm seeing all the great comments in our chat. We're almost at our time for close. We have about 7 minutes. I want to get Cleo's thoughts. I see you. Oh, Elizabeth says, Oseo family. She's given a Native Indigenous greeting. I would like to hear more about Native American two-spirit, same gender loving. I'm Cherokee. Okay, well, next show, we're going to bring you on. And then Muriel writes, how do we not censor? How can we continue to talk? How can we grasp humor with an understanding of the seriousness of issues? And we must remember, humor is a medicine. Beautiful. Oyalade Kandaki says, great conversation. Oh, she's thanking Lisa, or doing a blessings, Alafia sister, for coming on and for tagging her. Denise says, I think he is still in a birthing period of understanding when it comes to LGBT. So he's in a birthing period, Denise writes, not completely woke. And unfortunately, most of our Black community is in this sort of state, hiding behind their religious beliefs. And then the last thing, Ifashina says, exactly, there was a lot of opportunity to make a turf joke. He could have compared them to Nazis. Choosing to align himself with them was not only in bad taste, it was incredibly tone deaf. Powerful sentiments. Absolutely. Okay. And I'm sorry if I missed anybody. I'll go back and do some of these, write some of these comments up. Cleo, let's close with you. We have 6 minutes left. Please give us your closing statements.
I'll be quick. I want to reiterate the fact that Dave knows some Black SGL people. He even knows Black SGL couples that he's close to. So Black SGL people is not, he doesn't understand, sees LGBTQ XYZ phenomena, paradigm, and tick, and I agree with him. I also want to invite people. Well, I want to understand it's really good, despite the nuances that we have, including the nuances that we have something in all in common. That he should be canceled. And in my comments, that I had to go check out on Roland show, I reiterated that what David created was an opportunity to get some issues that otherwise were not engaged. I think we've all four of us, or three of us, have said along those lines. And if you want to see my commentary on this, go on YouTube and type "loving Roland Martin Chappelle," and it will come up. Martin Unfiltered Chappelle, and it will come up if you haven't seen. I also love that line that gave that empathy is bisexual. That was a great line. It was a respectful line of sexuality beyond heterosexuality as well. And I want to just underscore that. And I also want to
repeat that, Cleo. Could you repeat that? Because you kind of went out a little bit. Could you repeat that last thing that you said? That line was very poignant. Could you repeat that?
I said that him saying that empathy, after underscoring the importance of empathy and calling it bisexual, was a affirmation of sexuality beyond heterosexuality. Mm-hmm. And it was a respect-loving affirmation of sexuality beyond heterosexuality. And I think that should be acknowledged. Mm-hmm. Also, I think we should understand that David Chappelle is a comedian. He's not a scientist. He's not a behaviorist. He can't get it all right and do all the nuance with expertise because that's not who he is. He's particularly strange in a good way in terms of nuance that he considers. I found some of his comments around his judgment of masculinity being something that he clearly values, which has him in question about he's suspicious of gender nuance. He's suspicious of gender nuance when it comes to Black men, but not simply because he's just so-called transphobic, but he's concerned about the state of Black men, given what Black men have gone through. Mm. He's concerned about the emasculation and castration of Black men, which is why he wouldn't put on a dress. And I think it was safer for him, which and this could be considered a critique of him. It was safer for him to publicly affirm a white transgender person than publicly affirm a Black transgender person, because he's suspicious of that because of his concern about the compromise of Black men. And he's in question about whether some of this gender nuance stuff is the impact of the attack on Black men creating gender confusion. I don't say that well like that because I agree with him. I'm just talking about notions that are in the Black community, that the LGBTQ invasion of the Black psyche has interrupted our capacity to address in ways that are rational so we can understand why people feel the way they feel, so we can make an informed, considerate approach to educating them. You can't go to Black people, go, you're homophobic, you're homophobic, you're homophobic, when Black people already feel oppressed, when Black people have justified gender nuance suspicions because of what Black men have been through and win that fight. I have had conversations with Louis Farrakhan and Dr. Francis Cress Welsing and Molifi Asante, Malana Karenga, and people who are considered supersonically Black, who were once upon a time supersonically outside of heterosexuality as a way of being, who have shifted because of our interaction. Yeah. And the reason they shifted is because they could tell by my entree into the discussion that I understood the Black experience. And I wasn't coming from an LGBTQ white, Ellen DeGeneres, Elton John, Henry Hay perspective, but it was an African perspective, a Black perspective. And they were able to get into that. And I didn't beat them up for being ignorant. I asked them to justify, like I asked one very famous Black person, how can you justify throwing me away? And I sit there and waited for the answer. I don't ask rhetorical questions. And him having to answer that question in my presence became an education for him. I didn't beat him up. I said, what? Anyway, so I can go on with that. I just want to say that, again, David jumping on the side of the TERFs, who are women who don't support transgender women as women, is part of his suspicion of gender nuance because of his hyper concern, which is based in a justifiable perspective, even though his conclusion might be problematic. His come from is based on issues around the compromise of Black men that American society has not created space to talk about, and the LGBT community LGBT paradigm is damn sure not created any space to talk about. They want you to jump on their bandwagon and do LGBTQ and lesbian and all that. They don't want you to do Black. And I think that David Chappelle would prefer that we do Black. And I know I want us to do Black, but can't depend on David Chappelle to know me as well as I can teach him. He don't know me. He's a heterosexual man. But he do know some same-sex loving people. And ironically, the majority of them that he do know do not push the LGBT paradigm. They push the Black paradigm. And it's and the Black paradigm is unknown to a lot of us, including a lot of gay identified Black people. And I'll close with this. Among the horrific things that the white gay community tolerates because it's racist is stuff like Thug Hunter. Thug Hunter is a pornographic website about white men who hunt Black men and pay and give them money to have sex with them. And they call it hunting them. That's dehumanizing. And there's been no critique of that or cancellation of that by the LGBT paradigm. When Ed Buck was murdering Black people in his living room in West Hollywood, the mecca of white gayness in the United States, they were not saying that they were against Ed Buck and they were not resisting Ed Buck. So David Chappelle knows this. And he don't trust the LGBTQ community, not because of he's being homophobic, it's because of these things. In terms of the question about whether he's grown or not, I don't know if he has. I would say that he's grown to where he is, and he needs help us to get him anyplace else. But his priority is Black folks. However we do that, transfer him will have to be considered of the Black experience. We will.
Oh man, you're going out a little bit. That powerful stuff, Cleo. We have to have a part 2 of this discussion. This is truly an opening. And I thank you, Dave Chappelle. I thank you, Netflix, because we would not be having this dialogue had you not put this controversial show on your network. So I hope that, Netflix executives, I'm Love, TaShia, Asanti. We have with us Jayla, Sylvester, Michael, Crawford, Cleo, Manago, and we would love to come on Netflix and talk more about this paradigm. And to you, our audience, I want to thank everyone who tuned in tonight. I see that you're still coming in and commenting. I love this dialogue. Someone writes, this is Ifashina says, this is an instantly poignant point, and I'm deeply appreciating where Dr. Manago is speaking from. Ashe. And Muriel is just saying her thank you. We're saying thank you from Your World TV. Thank you to our sponsors, thepinkshot.com. Thank you to House of Pinky. Thank you to Noble Trinity Enterprises and Adulawo TV, our West African media partner. You can find out more information. If you have a topic, I want to know what's going on through the windows in your life. So if you have an idea for a topic or an idea for a show, contact me. You can go through the website at officialtashiaasanti.com or www.nobletrinityenterprises.com. And I want to thank all of our panelists. You have been amazing, amazing, amazing. And I'm excited, and I know that this is a beginning. This is an opening, and we only scratched the surface of what we're here to talk about. So we will be back. There will be a part 2, and I hope that all of you will be a part of it and tell some friends. Please share the video if you're watching. If you haven't already, let's make this show go viral. Please share the video on all your social media networks. Please, of course, share it on your Facebook networks. We're streaming live right now to YouTube, to Instagram, and to Facebook, and on Your World TV Networks platform. So we're reaching hundreds, if not thousands of people right now through this stream. So I want to thank all of you for being here. If no one's told you today, I want to tell you that I love you, community, not because I have to, but because I can. And may you continue to stay safe, wear your mask up, and sanitize. Stay safe, even though we know there's all kind of controversy around that too. But in the meantime, stay safe and stay COVID free. I love you most. Thank you all for coming on. Thank you to our panelists and our guests and our producers. Thank you for being here. Peace and have a great rest of your evening. I'm Love. Good night, everybody.